All right, and I think we're live. Yes, Meg? Okay, great. Oh no, we're not. Not sure. This might be the most awkward intro for a live stream ever. Okay.
Every live stream intro is awkward like this. This is not unique.
Cool. All right, I think we're live. All right, well, welcome everyone. We have Jill here from Espresso Systems, Lisa from Aztec, and DigitalSpacePort, who is a member of our community, has been an incredible support and has made countless of YouTube videos about Ironfish and how to set everything up. So thank you. So he's been kind of a pretty long-term person in the crypto community, especially in the mining community. So we'd love to have him on here as well. And the rest of the team is the Ironfish folks. So we have Jason, Derek, Daniel, and Rohan from the engineering team. And then we have Meg from marketing, Neil from marketing, Kelly, who's doing ops, and Lawrence, who's our engineering manager. Cool. So we just opened up the trusted setup ceremony. We are actually also all on Discord. So if people have problems installing Ironfish or doing anything like that, we are here to help. And so if you ask a question and you see one of the engineers that I mentioned madly typing, that might be them answering your question. So, or unrelated. But the reason why I wanted to do this is because privacy is becoming quite a topic now. And crypto in general is kind of in an interesting regulatory spot. And so what's really cool about the crypto community as a whole, and I think especially the privacy community, is just how close everyone is, because we understand the difficulty that we have of launching our prospective projects. Aztec is obviously launched, so would love to kind of ask you more questions there too. But yeah, so I kind of wanted to pause here and ask you guys, how did you first get into crypto and why privacy?
How about we go by whoever was in crypto first? Year did you guys all get in? I think I'm the latest. So officially 2021 for me.
Okay. Jill?
I started working full-time in crypto in 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay, Jerod, I don't know if you can beat 2015.
Yeah, so I'm going to be the old one here, I guess. I've been mining since you were able to mine Scrypt with GPUs, which was roughly the 2013 timeframe. So
hell yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things
a fun way to find out who the OGs are. So I'm glad to have you guys go first.
Totally.
So when I first got involved in crypto, it really was, hey, there's Bitcoin. There was so much excitement in the ecosystem around digital currency. It really turned out to be so flash in the pan the first two cycles, but I stayed with it and I started a community on Reddit and I got to meet really great people. And, sharing the technical things for somebody who might be a little bit nerdy is kind of what got me and kept me interested in the technical side of production of cryptocurrencies. It's a bit of a challenge. Doing it properly is something that has always been important to me, optimizing for efficiency. But that's what's gotten me into cryptocurrency. And this cycle with cryptocurrency has me just really excited because we're seeing so many new innovations. So that is a short background. I'm, of course, a YouTuber, DigitalSpacePort. I do a lot of content on a lot of different cryptos. Mainly new innovative cryptos, though, is what I look for and focus on.
Awesome. Okay, Jill, I think by seniority, you're next.
I was going to say, DigitalSpacePort, you have like the best setup there with the microphone. You have this like great presenter voice. You are a pro at this. So yeah, I'm going to come in here as kind of amateur hour. But yeah, I got into crypto initially. Well, I got interested in crypto initially, I guess back in like 2013. I was working on Wall Street at the time. And I was trading, of all things, Latin American sovereign debt. And so I guess one joke I could make is that I was looking for the only asset class out there that would be more volatile than trading the debt of like defaulting and hyperinflating countries, which I found in the form of crypto. But the real story is that a colleague of mine who was based in Argentina started using Bitcoin to get his money offshore, evading capital controls and getting out of what at the time was a rapidly inflating Argentine peso. And so, I'd talk to this guy like on a daily basis and get market color from him and whatever. And at some point he started telling me all about this Bitcoin thing, which I'd heard of, but like never really, gotten that interested in, thought that it sounded kind of sketchy, as a lot of people did back in those days. But hearing him talk about it, I was like, oh, there's something real here, and this is worth spending time on. So that was kind of my foray into it, and then have lived a bunch of lives, I guess, throughout the crypto world, done stuff with a few different L1s, including Zcash, like, the OG privacy project. Really proud to have done some go-to-market work with them back a few years ago. I've worked on the venture capital side, and then most recently, for the last couple of years, I've been working on a project called Espresso Systems, which, I'll share more about later.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, so I first learned about Bitcoin a long time ago, but I did not, like some others, kind of jump on it right away. So 2011 was when I first heard about it, but was looking at it more from, at the time was in consulting, and was looking at it more from a research perspective. It was being used in the context of one of the projects I was working on, but like Jill, thought it was not something I wanted to spend a ton of time on personally, initially, because it did seem kind of sketchy with early use cases. But when I got more interested in the crypto space more broadly was in 2017. So at the time I was living in New York, I happened to have met folks that were building at Consensus, and I was working at a venture capital firm and met them in the context of their like fundraising efforts. And after I left that meeting, I was just really intrigued by the entire space that they were sharing. So they weren't just talking about their company, they were telling me all about like Consensus and the hub and spoke model, and kind of like these decentralized networks that were being built. And at the time, everything was like, trying to put startups that were proven off-chain on-chain. And so some folks who were in the space back then might remember things like decentralized Airbnb and decentralized Uber, and it was like decentralized everything. Yeah. And although those ideas were not viable back then, probably not viable today, I was still interested in kind of learning more about the technology that was underlying all these ideas, and kind of the energy around the developers that were building on top of it. And so I spent time on it, was like, reading white papers like a lot of folks, but it just seemed way too early for someone with my background more on the go-to-market side to jump in. And so continued working and investing. And then the firm that I was at actually got acquired by a large asset management firm that was spending time in crypto from an institutional perspective. And so I worked with their CIO on looking at different custody solutions, different funds that they might want to invest in to give their clients exposure to crypto, both on the venture and hedge fund side. And then also educating their portfolio managers on like, what is DeFi? How do they talk to clients about these things? And that was all happening during the 2020 summer, DeFi summer. And I realized that a lot of the stuff I was reading about in 2017 had actually been built out. And so wanted to find a way to come into the space. And I was most interested in coming in to a place where I thought it would be kind of infrastructure that could support new use cases and give developers tools that they didn't currently have. And so that was what was really appealing to me about Aztec, because Aztec is solving both the problem around privacy and scalability as an Ethereum L2. So can share more about that later. But it was a long journey for me.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I think maybe we should share more about our projects. I think most people who are probably viewing this are somewhat familiar, but I think it'd be kind of good to go over as well. So Jill, do you want to explain a little bit about what Espresso does and kind of where in the roadmap you are and how people can kind of use the system today?
Yeah, gladly. It's like my whole life right now, so love to talk about it. So Espresso Systems is a company that's working on building, you can think of it as like a suite of like infrastructure and tools for Ethereum, to make it more decentralized, censorship resistant, scalable, and importantly, private. And so the first tool that we've launched is called CAPE, which stands for Configurable Asset Privacy on Ethereum. And the thing that I would emphasize there is the word configurable. Really the type of privacy that we are going for is a type of privacy that in a way reflects the privacy that you get in like traditional finance today, where it's totally fine and acceptable for your use case for some people to be able to view what's going on in your transactions, but also very important that you don't want others to be able to view it. And so with CAPE, what you can do is you can issue assets or create wrappers for assets that define and configure who can see what about the transaction details of the transfers happening with that asset. And so as an example, you know, if you are a stablecoin provider and you want to have a more private yet still sort of like risk averse and compliant version of your stablecoin, you can create a wrapper for your stablecoin using CAPE that people can then use such that you as the issuer still maintain insight into the transaction graph and everything going on the network without the whole world having to know all of your users' transaction details, which is the state of affairs today. So yeah, looking to kind of create the gray area, I guess, on the spectrum of the kind of more black and white approaches to privacy that currently exist within the Ethereum ecosystem. That's our first product.
Awesome. Lisa, do you mind giving like a short overview of Aztec and what are some of the things that people can use today?
Yeah, for sure. So we're building encrypted Ethereum is kind of the shorthand of it. And so what that means specifically is we're building an L2 that settles to Ethereum that allows developers to build private applications. What you can use today is a product called Aztec Connect. And Aztec Connect is a way for users to deposit their funds into Aztec and then interact with any of the DeFi protocols that are on L1 through Aztec's rollup. So what does that mean specifically? You could think of it a little bit like a VPN on your Ethereum experience. And you can interact with apps like Liquidity and Aave and Compound to basically get the same interactions that you would on L1, but cheaper and private. And the way that we do that is through rolling or bringing these transactions together and grouping them so that users can batch those transactions and then split the gas costs across the users. So that's Aztec Connect. And then the other product that we launched at DevCon is Noir. And Noir is attempting to be the universal ZK language. So it's a Rust-based domain-specific language that makes it really easy for engineers that are not cryptographers to build custom circuits and actually start playing around with ZK and building applications. So with that, we're seeing folks build applications around using ZK for things like gaming and identity and payments. And so that product is still a little bit newer. It's been out for a few months now, but it's really exciting to see people actually contributing directly to the language and building functions that our team has on the roadmap, but hasn't gotten to yet. Also tooling. So tooling around the language, it makes it easier for developers to use the language, and then actually using Noir in the wild with some of their applications. And then future Aztec is a decentralized L2 that will allow private smart contracts. So that's kind of like taking the Aztec Connect concept and putting it on steroids. So allowing people to do kind of anything that they want, similar to how they can on Ethereum, but on our L2, which will be private and scalable.
Can I just jump in with something, Elena, which is that I always love hearing other privacy projects talk about what they're doing. And I always get a little bit of a kick out of it because I hear people, like when I describe what Espresso is doing, especially people who are maybe like not as close to like crypto or, you know, even specifically the Ethereum ecosystem, whatever, will be like, oh, so like you guys are competitors with Aztec, or you guys are competitors with Ironfish or Alio or Penumbra or Zcash or like any number of these privacy projects. And I'm always like, oh, this is like, I mean, Lisa, you'll recall, anyone who's sort of been interested in crypto for any number of years will recall, like a few years ago, if you were working on anything crypto, you were automatically bucketed as competitors with everyone else who was doing anything blockchain or crypto. And it's like, you look at the ecosystem, the world that exists now today of all of these crypto projects, and you would never say that like Uniswap is competing with Solana or something like that. Like that would be totally incongruous. And I don't know, maybe this is me being starry-eyed and optimistic, but I hope this is the case. And I think that this is going to be the case, that we're going to look back in like 5 years and be like, oh, wait, like Aztec and Espresso were working on like two totally different privacy products for Ethereum, or like Ironfish's approach to privacy is like so different actually from what Alio is doing, even though they're both privacy L1s. It's going to look ridiculous to have bucketed all of these projects together and kind of called us all competitors, even though that's what people do today. But I was reflecting on that as you were talking, Lisa, because I get that sometimes when I talk about Espresso, but hearing you talk about it, it does strike me like, yeah, there's just such a big wide world of products to be built around privacy. I really think that there's plenty of room for all of us and more.
Yeah, in the broadest definition, I guess we would be competitive if you're like looking at the landscape of tools that are available, privacy tools that are available in Ethereum. But then like when you drill down to, okay, like what do you actually enable for developers? It like we're going after totally different use cases.
Totally. Yeah, which is cool, which is great.
And I kind of want to chime in here too. Like, I think it's actually good that it's a good thing that there are so many people working in privacy. Like if you look at kind of the volume of usage for anything crypto, like, the truth of the matter is privacy projects have relatively low volume, especially in comparison to some of the other projects that are happening in crypto. And so the question is like, well, why? And I think there's like a lot of reasons as to why, like, it's really hard to make privacy easy to use. It's really hard to explain privacy. It's really hard to get people to care sometimes. So, and the fact that there are so many people working, like so many extremely impressive, intelligent, hardworking people working on privacy, like that should be taken as a good thing. When we first started the concept of Ironfish, which was not even named Ironfish back in the day, I actually talked to Zuko and he was very open about it. He was like, we need more people working on privacy. And his perspective was like, look, like I want Zcash to win on privacy, but like at the end of the day, I actually want a privacy solution to win, because right now, if you compare volumes, so like transparent usage of crypto versus anything privacy related, I mean, it's pretty much nil. And so it's like, how do we get privacy more to the hands of crypto users?
I love that. Yeah, I give Zuko a lot of credit for sort of seeding that ethos throughout our little corner of the ecosystem.
So I do want to get into the regulatory stuff, and I'm going to do it through a question through Jerod, but I'll get there, I promise, which is, we are currently in the bull market. Oh, sorry, in the bear market, my bad. Bear market, unless I'm delusional. You are kind of dealing with the community of crypto. Like you're dealing with a ton of people who are either hobbyists or miners or GPU miners, or who are kind of chasing the next, cool thing. Kind of what is your perspective on the sentiment of crypto right now? And how are you seeing your community react to what's happening in the markets?
So one of my primary constituent groups that is, in my audience is definitely people that are involved with Chia. Jill actually, I think at one point was working on Chia, or was a board member on Chia. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
there,
no,
Jill.
that's right. Yeah, I invested in them through the venture fund that I was with, Slow Ventures, previously, and so worked closely with them through that. Yeah, awesome group.
And so they have a really innovative, new product out there, and proof of space and time, calling it new. I mean, this is the kind of longevity of crypto. It's like it's in development for so long. On the production side, you see people that really have seen a cataclysmic change as far as GPU minables. Their profitability is essentially gone. A lot of them are looking for things like what is next. So there is a lot of negative sentiment out there towards traditional GPU minables. What you're seeing with some of the ASIC minables out there is a move towards, can I get cheaper electricity? Is it viable for this specific miner to be operating? Those are hard questions that people are asking themselves right now. If you're looking at actually Chia hard drives, proof of space and time, it is technically quite profitable. It's probably one of the most profitable out there to be in. So most of my community sentiment is actually quite positive at the moment. When you're looking at what's happening in other cryptos out there, there's a lot of people looking at how they can dedicate their time towards something that's viable for them as a miner. And they want to optimize the projects they're in And this is a good example, like Zcash. I was mining Zcash back in 2017 a lot. And it really was something that I thought was great. But when I was a GPU miner, as soon as it became incredibly unprofitable, I started moving to other operations. So there's a lot of people that are looking for what's next right now. As well, there's a lot of people that are concerned that the cycle is going to change, and this is not a typical cycle. It's not going to be kind of the crash that we had last time. That seems pretty apparent. And what happens next is apparently going to be very heavily guided by regulation. So there's a lot of people very apprehensive about getting in certain types of projects as a result of that.
Gotcha. This is going to be kind of a weird question. So when we talked to some of the miners back in a while back, a lot of them actually said that they are, trying to find a different avenue for what to do with their business. And a lot of them are actually going into zero knowledge proofs. Like, how do you make ASICs for zero knowledge proofs effectively? Because they actually see that as the next frontier for crypto. So I'm just kind of curious, like, do you see that sentiment in your community as well?
There's a lot of people that are looking at different business models. And I think everybody, based upon how invested they are and how much capital they have access to, is trying to maximize their profits. As a miner, you're trying to always do this. MEV is real for a reason. So everybody's looking for what they can do with their money the most effectively. And there's a lot of new competing. I mean, we just talked about competition in crypto, and I love the concept of a kinder, gentler crypto where the competition is more soft and less harsh, because crypto right now has got so much harsh to it. And having, that less adversarial approach, I think would be such a net benefit to the crypto ecosystem as a whole. But certainly there's a lot of people looking at what they can do to maximize their profit. Anything that is a large CapEx expense right now is something that people are putting on hold as much as possible, because they're really concerned with, large expenditure in an unknown scenario.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do remember there was a time where bridges, like crypto in general had a pretty bad sentiment because bridges kept getting hacked. Like during Throne and hack, the Nomad hack, etc. And there was one tweet in particular, especially after Nomad hack, of whenever crypto people make mistakes, such as allowing, these hacks to happen, the world is already against crypto. Like, we can't within our community be also against crypto, because then we're not helping ourselves progress. And I really kind of like that of look, crypto has so much to work on to get mass adoption, and so much effort that we need to still put in to especially make the US government understand the industry. And so we can't kind of waste time trying to, go against our competition, so to speak, because we are our own allies. We are the allies that we have here.
We're gonna live together and die together.
Exactly.
The ultimate underdog. Crypto, ever since I've been in it, it is like the ultimate underdog story. And you get these brief moments where it's everybody's like, oh yeah. And I remember the moment I got my father into crypto, and he was like, oh yeah. But it took a long time. It took years and years. And so being kind of that ultimate underdog, not fighting with the other underdogs in our competition pack, seems like a really good move. Looking towards what we can do to prove out good, viable options. And also at the same time, if there is something that is just bad, calling it out early is important to do. And I think that's something that is happening more and more in the crypto ecosystem. But there are so many things that fly. I mean, I don't think anybody saw FTX is necessarily going to blow up quite like it blew up. So there's so much that is actually not able to be seen. What is going to be meaningful regulation becomes a really important question, because what's meaningful today may not be the same thing that was meaningful pre-FTX. So we could see a heavier weight on bigger regulations, a bigger impetus to regulate in a heavy-handed fashion. That's kind of my concern at the moment, is what happens next. And I agree. We got to be more we're all in this together, and the outcomes that we get are going to be dictated by how well we work as communities of crypto builders, not an individual entity in crypto.
Yeah, I mean, we actually are in this together. So Jill and I have been kind of speaking about this a bit more, but I would love to get Lisa's opinion as well. Right now, especially for the US government. So the US government is not just this one organization called the US government. There's actually a lot of bodies within the US government that care about different things. So for instance, the SEC regulates securities. OFAC regulates who's on the sanctions list and how to enforce that. FinCEN cares about financial crime. So these different organizations care about different things. And I think as one person put it, you can kind of think of these organizations as like a hammer, and they see everything as a nail. So, so if you are, dealing with financial crime, you see crypto with the lens of financial crime and so on. And unfortunately, right now, there's kind of like this really lack of understanding of crypto in general, unfortunately. And then on top of that, privacy just seems really scary. And when you talk to these people individually, at least from my experience, everyone's actually on board with privacy. Like the sentiment of privacy, everyone can get on board with. And then when you start talking about like the specifics, the lack of understanding makes it so that they find privacy in crypto scary and they're kind of against it. So for Ironfish is still not launched, Espresso is still not launched. And so we're kind of having these preliminary conversations, but Aztec is launched. So I don't know. I mean, obviously the majority of the team is non-US, but you are in the US. How do you kind of view the sentiment of crypto, and how do you navigate kind of explaining privacy, especially to these different regulators?
Yeah. So Aztec is a UK-based company, and we are working with the UK government on kind of their latest thinking on crypto regulation. So I think like the lens that we have is kind of more oriented towards the UK, as that's where our founders are, and that's where we're incorporated. That's where a large portion of our team is. In terms of the US, like it's something that we obviously are very attuned to as well, given we have employees here and the large majority of our investor base is also US based. So we feel like we have like pretty good insights into how the US government is thinking, and have been fortunate to be a part of like conversations related to that. And looking back on 2022, we as a team that had a product that was live, and in light of like kind of what was happening around Tornado Cash, we just like wanted to make sure that our system and our users were protected. And so the way that we thought about it was, how do we, one, put practical limitations on the system to reduce the risk to our users, and then also work with different groups that could give us insight into the activity on the network. So examples of that are like Chainalysis, for example, and another system that kind of like tracks just activity in and out of the system. So it's something that we are monitoring really closely, and we've created like protocols internally to address any issues if they arise. But we right now are very focused on kind of making this transition to like enabling developers to use our SDK and Noir to build applications, and then have them be able to have the tools that they need from a compliance perspective to meet the needs of their jurisdictions. And so that's kind of the way that we're looking at it right now. It's like, how do we enable the developers to have these compliance mechanisms and have it be flexible and not necessarily be dictating what that is at a network level. And so the idea was like kind of like protecting the network through these limitations, and then looking forward, giving tooling to developers to make sure that they have the ability to comply and like have that flexibility depending on where they're serving users.
Yeah. I think that's actually so for Ironfish, for instance, we're kind of having the same conversation of like, where do we put those controls? So I'm sure like a lot of our viewers know what Ironfish is, but just a quick summary. Ironfish is a new layer 1 chain where all transactions are encrypted. And we kind of view Ironfish as being a privacy layer for other chains as well. So for instance, if you have assets on Ethereum or Solana or Near, the end goal is for us to bridge to those chains and have Ironfish be this universal privacy layer for all of those chains. So we just launched phase 3 a couple of weeks ago, where we launched multi-asset feature. So now you can have custom assets on Ironfish, such that anyone can create their own custom asset, and the transactions will be indistinguishable from one another, preserving privacy. And so right now we're kind of having this conversation of like, where do those controls put in place? Like, should the layer one be responsible for potentially flagging bad activity? And I think that's kind of what, you just described. Like, is the protocol like Aztec, is Aztec responsible for flagging malicious activity, or do we enable tools such that people who use the protocol are better equipped to catch bad activity? And I think this is a pretty convoluted argument. Like, it's really hard, right? Because it depends on who you ask, and it depends on what context. And one approach definitely goes against the ethos of crypto. Like, I think most people in crypto would say the protocol layer, should be pure, for lack of a better word. And it's, how it's used is kind of where the governance should be. And for Espresso, I think you guys are kind of, even though you have configurable privacy, you kind of are also having this conversation as well of like, do we as the company regulate the protocol, or do we give the tools for whoever uses to regulate the protocol? So I kind of want to open up the floor to you as well of how you guys were thinking about it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is something that we talk constantly about, even just from like a product design perspective. Like, I think it's sometimes helpful to actually take like the big scary overlords of the government out of it and just think for a second about like, okay, like practically speaking, like who are the users that we're building the product for? What are their concerns? What do they want to get out of it? And, I think that one thing that we identified before even the Tornado Cash sanctions happened was that there was a broad swath of Ethereum users who wanted some privacy, but who weren't comfortable using Tornado Cash. Like, I'm in that category, actually. Like, I for sure wanted to like move things around to wallets and like move NFTs around, buy NFTs, whatever, make donations to, the efforts in Ukraine, like all of these things without it being linked to like my, sort of canonical Ethereum wallet that, has literally my name and my ENS associated with it. Like, I want to do this stuff without it being linked to that. But at the same time, I always felt this like little twist of discomfort using Tornado Cash. Not like from an ideological perspective, but just from like the purely practical perspective of like, this I know has some like sketchy activity associated with it. It's no secret. Like, everyone knew that, stuff was being moved through Tornado Cash that had come from hacks and whatever else. And like, that doesn't feel great as a user. Like, I don't know if this thing could be shut down. I don't know if there's going to be a crackdown around this. I don't think any of us like fully predicted that things would play out as it did. But that again, that just speaks to like, okay, what does the users need? And we specifically are trying to design for a user that wants some level of transparency, which is a great like feature set and goal of blockchains as well. Having that type of real-time data transparency, but is not comfortable with the whole world seeing everything that they're doing. And so that's really how we try to frame and guide most of our product decisions, is again, taking out like the big scary government overlord of like, can we do this? Like, can we frame things in this way and like make it be, okay and compliant, and much more about just like, okay, who is the person we're designing for? That still does get hairy because, on some level you are designing for a much wider range of use cases than like what I just gave as like my own personal example. Like, we do want to be designing for the dissident in Hong Kong, or, the guy in Argentina, like using it to evade capital controls or whatever it is. And so then, the question of like, well, how permissionless do we make this? Do we require that every asset does have like a configured privacy policy where, there is some viewer, there is someone who can see the transaction graph? How much of that transaction graph does someone need to be able to see for it to be acceptable and okay? Again, not just to the government, but, for those types of more edge case users to come in and want to use it. it's still a tangled mess, don't get me wrong, which is why we're still talking about it like every day. But just to share a little bit more about how we really try to frame things as we're discussing it on our side.
Awesome.
I got a question. Since I'm able to be joined with so many stellar minds, do you see the L1 distribution of Ethereum as potentially having a weakness with the federal government, or do you think that it's going to be okay?
In terms of like the validator set of Ethereum potentially being cracked down on, or in terms of, things like people were worried about with MEV boost omitting tornado cash transactions and therefore being a little bit of a bottleneck, like things like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, both of those, but specifically the SEC and whether or not the majority of block formation were to be happening in the United States. Do you think that that would actually be a problem, or do you think that that is an opportunity space for possibly the chain to distribute and grow more organically in other regions? I just saw that Ironfish has 25,000 nodes, which congratulations to the Ironfish team. That is wildly impressive. And I am a decentralization maxi, so I've got to say that I love decentralization as much as possible.
I mean, I'll just give a quick answer, but I want to hear what everyone else has to say. I mean, I think and I hope that Ethereum will prove itself to be very resilient in the face of any of this kind of censorship. I mean, even already, like in the face of, what happened with Tornado Cash and a lot of what people were worried about as being the blowback on it of, Coinbase and these big regulated entities within the US being huge swaths of validators on the network. I mean, I think Brian Armstrong came out at the time and said, like, we would sooner stop validating on Ethereum than pose a threat of like censorship propagating on the main Ethereum chain. I'm butchering that. Sorry, Brian. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but I remember you saying something along those lines. And, even solutions that cropped up on like the issue of flashbots omitting Tornado Cash transactions of, I think that there's evidence there that Ethereum will be resilient to that kind of thing in the same way that for so long people were so worried about so much of Bitcoin mining being in China. And like, lo and behold, like market forces, they figure it out. That's my perspective on it, but I'm sure others have different ideas.
I guess if I were to rephrase the question a tiny bit, and this might be a little bit more towards Aztec, but maybe towards Espresso as well. So Aztec right now is a layer 2 with a validator, and I believe it's a singular validator, right? So how do you feel about, like, Jerod kind of represents like a community of people who are super excited to like participate in like network health and like, kind of dedicate their resources and like make the system more decentralized. And I think there's this new wave of like, not just layer 2s, but even layer 1s, kind of like what Jerod was saying, that kind of, I don't want to say boxes people out, but it does minimize how a person can participate with the same ethos of like, kind of putting in their efforts to make the community or to make the network more healthier. So I guess to circle back, like, how do you feel about, Aztec being a layer 2 with a minimal number of validators? And I believe it's 1, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we need to learn from Ironfish. It's kind of my first thought in terms of our decentralization strategy. So for Aztec Connect, as I mentioned before, it's kind of this like application that's on Ethereum that's showing how privacy applications could work with kind of existing DeFi applications on L1. And so for that, we have kind of us running this sequencer, roller provider, whatever you want to call it. And then for the future state of like Aztec 3, which will have a rebrand, but basically like the decentralized private smart contract platform, that's where we're going to focus on decentralization. So Aztec Connect is kind of, you can think of it more as like a single application on Ethereum versus the future network. And I know, like, Ethereum is a huge inspiration to our team. We've been in the Ethereum ecosystem as long as the company's been around, and it's like extremely important to how we're building the architecture of the future network to make it as decentralized as possible. And so within that, it's like, okay, not just decentralized with like kind of the key infrastructure providers today, but like make it possible for anyone to run a node. And so that's something that is kind of in our architecture plans and something that we're working on for that future state, but it's kind of like not in production right now. And so note to self, when it does come live, or when we're on the path to going live, I think thinking through how we can get like a really broad geographic validator network is like hugely important, and obviously like something that we'd love to learn from people that have had success doing that.
Nice. Yeah. I think like during the last bull cycle in particular, there was this huge discourse of like, is decentralization important? And I don't know if you remember like Vitalik wrote this blog post where, you know, the TLDR of his blog post is that yes, decentralization is important and like it should trump everything. But, you know, at the same time, Solana is still huge, right? And the kind of the discourse was the opposite. I know we're supposed to like keep the topic on privacy, but I'm just kind of really curious because obviously our interest took a different route, and we're like, you know, always trying to make it easier and easier for people to run a full node and easier for people to participate. And I kind of, Jerod just mentioned that you're decentralization maxi, like, so am I, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts of like, why do you think decentralization is so important? Because I mean, like, as we saw in the past bull market, like there are a lot of people passionate on both sides of that argument. So I would love to kind of hear your answer.
So I think my answer stems back to, I take like deontological approach to crypto, which is basically looking for the extents that I think would apply universally the best. And I think that should be the basis of most formation. And I think lining, but the L1s for some reason seem to line up towards this, and finding really good geographic distribution. It lowers the importance of the US government's potential for regulation, and it makes it an international conversation. And I think that is a very important topic for me. I believe that seeing the development center being based in the Bay Area and seeing that shift potentially to other countries could be a really huge economic development, not just for those countries, but also potentially even a really good boon on the whole for crypto. I don't necessarily think that we could see the next cycle, the next big bull run. I don't think that it has to be based in the United States. I would love to see it based in a multitude of different countries out there. I think that gets a consensus mechanism, and people talk about adoption. I look at places like Vietnam, where it is illegal, and yet they have the highest adoption rate in the world. And
Really? I did not know that. Like crypto is entirely legal in Vietnam?
If you get caught, you can get in fairly decent trouble. And it is
Oh my gosh.
that people are utilizing it so much because it is so much better than the Vietnamese dong at maintaining and holding stable peg. So there is so many benefits to having an international conversation. And that's why I like decentralization, because it brings everybody to the table to talk about why they are looking at cryptocurrency. And when I started out crypto, I had a very US centric kind of viewpoint. As I started communities on Reddit, as I grew a YouTube channel, my viewpoint has changed dramatically, and crypto is an international phenomenon, and it is an internationally important aspect of what happens next with global finance. And looking at where that happens, how that happens, and the idea sets that make that happen shouldn't just be a conversation that's based in the United States, is my personal viewpoint on it. That's kind of where I come from.
That's awesome. Just to kind of bring it back to privacy. So, you know, I think we're, especially after that, like monologue, thank you. Like, I think we're bought into crypto. Now, how do we convince people that privacy is important? So Jerod, you've been kind of mining Zcash in 2017. What motivated you to do so?
So profit motivated me at the time to do so. I was looking at the Scrypt. So I think I had just gotten Cryptseed. If I'm remembering back, yes, Cryptseed had just kind of blown up or something like that. And I was looking at what was most profitable. I was very interested in Scrypt. So like mining Dogecoin, doing things that were silly, like sending the Jamaican bobsled team to the US Olympics through Dogecoin donations, stuff like that was a lot of fun early on in crypto. And so looking at how I could actually, utilize my resources towards something was really important to me, because I had at that point grown my second GPU farm. And it struck me, the conversation started to be around privacy. And I loved that, because that was a really important aspect of crypto that wasn't necessarily talked about. And I started going to some meetups and meeting with people that were like writing pieces of software that were able to track Bitcoin transactions. And it was becoming apparent, this is not like, okay, you're using a public blockchain, a public ledger. This is probably the worst place to commit crime, because it is incredibly trackable. So I saw that starting to manifest. And so I started to think, it's more than just crime. And if you look at where the statistics point to, more crime is committed off blockchains through financial, means than on blockchains. So I always like to circle back to that when anybody talks about, crime and blockchain. It happens elsewhere way more frequently than it happens on blockchain. And I think one of the important parts of privacy is your ability to have your representative state of finance should not be my business. I don't believe that I should be able to publicly look up your address and find out your net worth unless you've allowed me to. And I think that that's one of the fundamental things that Bitcoin was revolutionary, but it just did not quite encompass. And I think a lot of other cryptos just kind of took that and forked it a little bit and rolled forward. I mean, that's definitely what happened. But if you look at where we're at now, there's a reimagination of cryptocurrencies. There's a reimagination of L1s. We're in like literally the most exciting time since Bitcoin became Bitcoin, in my opinion, for cryptocurrencies to revolutionize finance.
That is an awesome answer. Oh, I'm inspired to build.
Amen. Totally.
Okay, Jill, since you have your mic off,
hard acts to follow all around from Digital Spaceport today.
No, but I think you can do it, because you've been an advocate for privacy for literally like years. Like
since I got into the space, basically. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it was one of the things that kind of hit me in the face from the outset of like, if this stuff is going to go anywhere, you need privacy. And I think that actually came from two totally different but like converging perspectives that I had. So one perspective was literally the colleague I had who was, getting his Bitcoin offshore. And like very quickly upon going into like the Bitcoin talk forums and like learning about it myself and whatever, I was like, dude, aren't you worried about, the Argentine government figuring out what you're doing and like coming after you, and that this isn't like a fully private system, right? And he was like, yeah, I know, but like, this is still like a better option than anything else that's available to me, and I'm not that worried about it, and so whatever. And as far as I know, he was totally fine. Like, in Argentina, there's still like a great and thriving Bitcoin community, and it's still totally legal. Like there has not been any kind of crackdown in this way.
That's true.
But so that though was like a very strong perspective just from the outside of like, oh, if I'm using crypto in this way that feels like a very real and substantial use case, if you're in Argentina, like you're immediately worried though about the privacy issue to some degree or another. The other perspective that I had on it, again, kind of from the outset, from like the earliest days of learning about Bitcoin, was very much informed by me working on Wall Street, where on Wall Street, like the privacy of what you're doing relative to all of your counterparties and competitors and whatever is paramount. Like you're basically playing this big poker game with, if you're at Goldman Sachs, you're playing poker against JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and Deutsche Bank. And not to mention on some level also like, all of the hedge funds out there and whatever else. And so being able to keep your cards close to your chest, it's like, that's, you can't do anything without that. The game falls apart, or at a minimum, you're going to be losing the game. And so, hearing all of the kind of grandiose visions for blockchain that were kind of percolating around in 2014, 2015, of like, oh, this is going to replace finance in general, like all of that, it was like, you guys are delusional if you think this is going to replace finance if we can all see each other's poker hands. Like, there's no way. Colored coins were a thing on Bitcoin at the time. People were talking about, like, if you could tokenize like stocks with colored coins. And all I could think was like, it seemed so myopic at the time because there was so much interesting stuff going on. But I was like, there's no way any hedge fund is going to buy into like some tokenized stock where all of its holdings are, totally transparent and visible to all of its competitors. And so again, it was these two kind of like very different, like on the one hand, like very institutional, like Wall Street perspective, and on the other hand, very like needs to be censorship resistant, like almost a little bit like a narco libertarian perspective, that both kind of led me down the privacy rabbit hole. And both of those to this day, I feel like are both extremely important reasons for why we need privacy. I think both of those end up looking like quite different, like products or protocols or whatever, actually, for those two different types of users, which I guess is also why I think there's so much room in this space.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, the way I would describe it is like very practical. Like Jill, your take was like very practical, and I think I'm pretty similar. It's coming from like, one of the things that got me into the space, or like how I thought about when I was coming to space, was like, what do I think will actually help to get mainstream adoption of these kind of decentralized networks? And one of the things that I realized after like coming from the institutional side was, same as Jill, like it's just not going to take off if we can't get more non-crypto native assets on chain. And so I'm actually excited by teams that are working on bringing these like real world assets, or kind of like whatever you want to call it, on chain, and enabling people to transact with things like debt for kind of real world in financial institutions, or bringing on like different investment opportunities like treasuries, funds, et cetera, on chain, and enabling people to invest in those vehicles, but also benefit from like the kind of building blocks that are available on chain, and like the open development that happens on chain. So I think the way that I come to the space is like, okay, well, where do we think we can get adoption of these like privacy tools? And the two things I think I would bucket is like, one, there's like the kind of crypto native use cases. So people that are already transacting on chain, but like would benefit from getting privacy. And that's like thinking about things like private voting for DAO governance, or payments for DAO contributors, and enabling them to get their salaries on chain without that being publicly available information. On the real world side, like kind of off-chain activities and bringing them on chain, I think of things like Goldfinch and Ondo, which are examples of like companies that are building protocols to bring investment opportunities that are from like the real world or off-chain world on chain. And then also things like, I think payments are going to be huge for merchants and for even peer-to-peer payments with stable coins. And like, in order to build applications that are competitive with like the Web2 equivalents, you need to have privacy in order to do that. So I think all of those examples are like less ideological and more just like, well, how do you make a product that's like taking the best of kind of what already exists, and then combining that with some of the like magic powers of what happens in like the crypto ecosystem, and the ability for you to like build these cool experiences and have developers like build integrations across all these different products. So getting the best of both of those two things.
Yeah. I love that you guys both pointed out like the practicality of it. I think one thing that like when I learned about Zcash, like way back in the day, and to this day, like Zcash kind of advertises privacy as a human right, which is very much true. But for a lot of people, it's a very like abstract concept, right? Like what does that mean that privacy is a human right? Like in terms of practicality things. And so the way I think about crypto and within the realm of privacy, like it's kind of like a dark mirror episode. Like let's imagine that crypto does become the most used payments layer as it is today, which is 100% transparent. So like, what does that world look like? Okay. Everyone knows where you get your coffee in the morning, at exactly which coffee shop, which means they know when you're out of the house and exactly where. Everyone knows what salary you're getting, who you're interacting with, who your friends are, who you potentially might be dating, who you might potentially not be dating anymore. Like literally your entire life can be kind of like can be kind of gleaned from your financial history. And so that to me felt really bizarre of like, wait, this is the world that we're moving towards. And this is, to some extent, like the world that, if US kind of regulation has its way is kind of moving towards already. So that to me felt kind of a little weird, a little scary. And then back to the practicality point, I mean, you guys mentioned like JP Morgan and like big financial institutions, so how much privacy matters to them. JP Morgan has worked on a privacy project for Ethereum. It's called Ether. And I believe Jill's co-founders were also co-authors of that paper that JP Morgan worked on. And then EY, which is one of the biggest consulting groups that also works with, largest financial institutions in the world, including US ones. They made a protocol called Nightfall, which again is a privacy protocol on Ethereum. So it's kind of like, from a very practical perspective, like even these highly regulated financial institutions are like, wait, like we want to get into crypto, but we can't get into crypto as it is today.
Totally. Yeah. And it feels like those two things should be almost competing against each other, of like the human rights side of things and the institutional side of things. But yeah, there is actually deep overlap in it. And I love the specific examples that you point out, Elena, there. I think that those are such good data points to point to of like, yeah, no, institutions actually really do need and care about privacy too.
Yeah. Cool. All right. We have 2 minutes. I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining. Firstly, it's really awesome to see other privacy projects kind of working in the space. We're all huge fans of Aztec, by the way. At least I myself consider myself a fangirl of Aztec. Like I think.
Me too.
Okay, cool. I mean, the tech that you're building is really impressive. And for people who don't know, the co-founder of Aztec also was a co-author of Plonk, which is one of the leading ZK zero knowledge proof solutions right now. So that's pretty awesome. I think you guys should try and advertise that part a bit more. But
yeah, I probably should have mentioned when we were talking about how we got into the space. I mean, the huge part.
All right, I got you.
Team, just being with the people that built the technology that's kind of becoming this foundational thing that's being used across the industry is pretty powerful. So yeah, I have an awesome team.
I just love how us three obviously, but then Alio, Penumbra, and a bunch of others, we're all actually approaching privacy from a different angle, which is really great because again, there's no privacy solution in my mind that has quote unquote won yet. There's no privacy solution that has mass adoption, and unfortunately, Tornado Cash was kind of getting there, but for the wrong reasons. So I just really want to thank you for coming on here. It really means a lot, and we'll be speaking a lot more, especially as we'll be kind of all of us are gearing towards launching our projects, especially in the US market. So
thanks for having us, and congrats on the awesome launch.
Yeah, congrats to the whole community.
Yeah, we're working hard. Thank you so much, Jerod, for being a part of it and cultivating it.
I try, but you know what? I'm really just having fun. So at the end of the day.
Oh, appreciate it. Cool. All right. And I think it's a really good stopping point. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Bye.